peace is present at all times, at all places, every moment. One who is wise recognizes that peace cannot be gained through struggling, nor by sitting down and doing physically nothing. And the four things that create disturbance in peace is lust, kama, a strong obsessive desire to possess something. Attachment means our dependence on something, which naturally will create worries, anxieties. So desire creates agitation. Attachment creates worries and anxieties. And when there's a sense of mineness, possessiveness about something, that this belongs to me, naturally, our mind will always be concerned about that. And that which gets easily hurt is our ego. Observe your own mind, and you will find it is one of these four that is agitating your mind. And once you become aware what is actually taking away your peace, your mind will be ready to give it up. And very often, why we cannot give up something which is harmful to us is because we feel that our happiness depends on that. But on the contrary, we lose our peace. And where there is no peace, there is no happiness. Shanti and Ananda. Peace and happiness go hand in hand. But these four that take away our peace and therefore even our happiness, why is it that we are not able to give it up? Because all these four we feel gives us some form of joy or happiness. But we do not understand where happiness lies. Again, which happiness do we want? Do you want a happiness which is available now and not available later on? What we are looking for in life is permanence. Everlasting happiness. But day and night, all of us are striving, struggling, working. Tell me, what are you working for? To be miserable? But we think that our happiness depends on wealth. We think that our happiness depends on a particular job. We think our happiness depends on a certain particular person. And that misplaced happiness creates a desire. Our rishis have pointed out 3 types of happiness and the 4th which we do not even know. But what we are seeking is that. They've even listed our types of happiness as Priya, pleasure, Moda, joy, Pramoda, happiness. And there is one more, and that is what we seek, is complete, everlasting happiness, which has been called as bliss, Ananda. Whenever anything is pleasing to the senses, it may be harmful to your health. Long term, it might even give you pain and sorrow. But Priya. But all pleasures are felt only when your sense organs come in contact with sense objects. Is it not? When you take a spoon of halwa, as long as it's in touch with your senses, it is pleasurable. How long can that sense pleasure last? Only as long as your sense organ is in contact with your sense object. Pleasures born of the senses can never be permanent. Then, something that you experience emotionally, there's a greater joy in it. That's called as joy. When you work sincerely out of love towards a goal or for a person, besides the pleasure that you get, there is a joy that you get. Is it not? When a loved one is coming home, and for example, your child has gone abroad to study, and when the child is coming home, just to cook for that child is such a joy for you mothers, is it not? That is called as moda. Because the joy brought out by your emotions, no? The joy that you experience is much more than the pleasure of the senses. But our mental emotions also keep on changing, is it not? Yeah. Today you love someone, tomorrow you hate that person. Moods also keep on changing. Even that is not permanent. But there is something called as pramod, happiness. And when do you get that happiness? Whenever you live according to your values, your principles, your ideals, your nature, your swabhava, when you're just expressing your own nature, just as a peacock starts dancing, he's not looking for some applause. No? When you live according to your swabhava, according to your nature, whether it's physically, emotionally, and intellectually, there is such a sense of inner satisfaction that you don't look out for any appreciation, you don't look out for any applause, you don't look out for any gain also. That is called as pramoda. That's a higher form of happiness. Even that happiness is not dependent on any external object. Thus, if you can work in that manner in the world, then every work becomes a means of happiness. That life, free of anxiety, is not only a peaceful life, but is also a life of happiness. That freedom to express your nature, not freedom to express your senses, that is what we call as happiness. But the Upanishads have pointed out far greater than that happiness, which comes from your nature, your swabhava, countless times more than that happiness, when you discover your Swarupa. And that own self, Atma, is Ananda or bliss. And that happiness has got no comparison to anything in this world. That is called as Ananda or bliss. That is the bliss that the scriptures are pointing out about. Let us understand. Because you see what happens? Our mind always wants happiness. But the trick of the mind is that makes you feel that pleasure is happiness, joy is happiness. But happiness is in expressing your own nature, and bliss is in being yourself. Now, let us take it to make us understand that when Shri Krishna said, Vihaya Kamanya Sarvan, no? Having abandoned all desires, no? Which all desires? Our desire for happiness we cannot give up. But when we have an obsessive desire, which is called as kama or lust, for any object, our mind gets agitated. The problem is that we are all seeking happiness, but we are running after objects. We all want permanent happiness, but we are constantly struggling and working for impermanent objects. And no object is permanent. But how simple it is to understand for anybody with intelligence that what we are seeking is permanent happiness. And day and night we are struggling, losing our peace, torturing ourselves for some object of pleasure, which gives us a momentary pleasure and then leaves us a lifelong of craving till we get it again. And thus life goes only in a cycle, up, down, up, down. Moments of pleasure, moments of joy. Have we even questioned ourselves, what are we doing? We want happiness, but we only create more problems and sorrows for ourselves. We want peace, but we only create more anxiety for ourselves. First, at least recognize it. Otherwise, you can do as much meditation as you want, nothing is going to happen. Then you can live in this blind faith that my guru is going to lift me. No? Kabir Das clearly said, Guru ki karni guru le jayega, cheli ki karni chela. Guru is going to take his own merits with him. He is sharing what blessed him. You take it and bless yourself. Don't delude yourself. The Guru's work is to point out to us the path. Walk we have to ourselves. First of all, we are seeking permanent happiness. But we are day and night working towards impermanent objects. Impermanent objects are required for our sustenance. Nobody says that. Wealth is required for house, food, shelter, clothing, which is required to protect this body. But this body is for something greater. If you even carefully observe, somebody will say, at least I am getting some pleasure from sense objects. So that's the only happiness we know. I'm getting some pleasure from sense objects, is it not? No? Therefore, the modern method of thoughtless thinking, which means unintelligent thinking, I mean that, no? Is that we know only temporary things. So if I get pleasures and I continuously go on getting pleasures, then I'll be happy at all times, is it not? But unfortunately, that also doesn't happen. The more you satisfy your desires, the more your desires increase. Therefore, when the rishis, the thinkers, analyzed, they said that is not the solution. Yet we cannot give our thirst of happiness, permanent happiness. So they started inquiring, where does happiness lie? And they understood that if happiness was the nature of sense objects, what's the nature of sugar? Sweetness. It can be brown, it can be white, it can be crystal, it can be powder, it can be cubical. That is not the nature of sugar. But wherever at any time you take sugar, it will be sweet. Sugar is sweet to everybody, but will sugar give happiness to everybody? Rishis did not deny that there are no pleasures in sense objects, but there is no permanent happiness gained. But even when you inquire, even that pleasure which you taste as temporary happiness cannot come from that object. Because if it was the nature of that object, it would give you happiness at all times, at all places, to everybody, like sweetness in sugar. Which means that happiness is not in the sense object. There are only two things: the objects of the world that constitute everything that you experience, and the subject, the experiencer. If it is not the nature of objects, then it must be the nature of the subject. And besides this logical explanation, is it not true that whenever you enjoy something, whenever you feel pleasure, joy, or happiness, what do? Happiness is the nature of your own self. And yet we search for it outside in temporary objects, never finding it. Happiness is our own nature. But we run around searching for it outside. But if it's my own nature, why don't I feel it? This only shows that I don't know my own nature. The scriptures are revealing to us who we are. And one who knows tattva nishchaya matrena pragyo bhavati nirvrita. Such a person discovers himself to be peace, discover himself to be happiness. But how do we discover ourselves? In the 5th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Shri Krishna has pointed out, Shaknoti iha sodum prak sharira vimokshanat kama krododbhavam vegaha sayukta sasukhi naraha. He has given the secret of happiness here and now. He says, one who here itself, in this life itself, is able, before giving up this body, to bear the onslaught, the vega, the tsunami, the tidal wave of these two. One who can conquer the onslaught of lust and krodha, anger. Sayuktaha, such a person is peaceful, means a yogi, yukta, united. Sukhi naraha, such a person indeed is a happy person. Because these two forces can never allow you to be in peace. And where there is no peace, as we said in the beginning, there is no happiness. Desire, when it rises in the mind, lust, when it arises in the mind, if at that time you don't give into it, it fades away. It's not as powerful. Anger, at that moment when it comes, if you can stand apart and at that moment not give into anger, it will fade away. Krishna doesn't say that one who never gets angry or one who never has any desire. Desire will arise. Anger will arise. But at that moment, you can stand apart from it. They have only a limited time power. When they appear, they are very powerful and they can drag you along with it. But if at that moment you can refrain yourself from expressing it, then it will pass away. It won't be that strong. Those desires which are harmful to you, even though pleasurable, how can you refrain from it? That when that impulse of desire comes, you stand apart from it. When that anger comes, stand apart from it. Don't give in to it. Even if that moment you can hold on. If you are not sincere, it is very difficult. If you have understood everything that we have told you, it is very simple. And where there is happiness, there is peace.